Recording in progress. What's up, guys? I'm Jacob. This used to be the Prepper's Bunkered Outdoors. Now it's just Jacob Peterson. It's just my channel, and I talk a lot about knives. So on the channel tonight, we have Gabe from The Last Huntsman. We've got Phil on Instagram. He's my brother from a maple syrup flavored mother. And
at least his head doesn't split in two halves and bounce and bobble around.
Exactly. Exactly. Oh, this is a shirt from Redbeard Blades. He is a friend of mine, not necessarily affiliated with the channel, but a great guy. And if you're looking for a custom knife, definitely check out Redbeard Blades. Also, I am going to pimp myself here. I do have a knife available for auction. It's currently on Instagram as a silent auction. This will be up until February 2nd. This is a custom jackalope sheath in crazy horse leather made by Michael Spaniers at Spirit of the Bear Designs. You can see we have a rabbit skull with horns there. It's the coolest sheath I've probably ever seen in my whole life. And we have antler handle scales made by Alan at Primitive Bear Knives. So this is up and available for auction, Exodus Knife and Tool on Instagram. And if you don't have an Instagram, you can shoot me an email to see where it's at, and you can place your bid that way. And currently we are starting this bid at $300. So guys, today we're talking about knife value. So that is going to be a subjective measurement based on a broad spectrum of things from quality, materials, comfort, outright performance, etc. And a little bit of why we might have this discussion is it seems to me that I have seen two camps here of people who need the newest, Gucciest, most expensive thing and become fanboys. And then people over here saying whatever is cheapest is best, or whatever is cheapest and works best, or it's just as good, etc., 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 without understanding what it is, the balance that a really good and potentially expensive knife really strikes to be worth what it costs. And also, a knife could be worth something to one guy who's out and using it every single day, and it might not absolutely not be worth it to the person who goes out once a year and barely does anything and just needs a tough knife that will rarely get used. So I guess I'm going to open the floor. Gabriel, tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us some opening thoughts. Then we'll go over to you, Phil, in Canada.
Well, I got to correct you. It's Canuckland. I officially renamed his country. He doesn't have any say in it. But
I like that.
Okay. Well, anyways, I'm Gabriel with The Last Huntsman Outdoors. I have my own YouTube channel, so be sure to check me out there and on Instagram. I have a little bit of a Facebook presence too, but I think YouTube and Instagram is kind of where I mostly do my stuff. And I do a lot of knife and gear testing as well. And I do have the only affiliation I have is Armitage Carry with coupon code Last Huntsman and all capital letters for a little discount off of Kydex from Armitage Carry.
Rock and roll. All right, Phil.
Well, I'm Phil from Phil's EDC, just mainly on Instagram right now, but people keep nagging me to start up a YouTube page. So I think I'm going to start doing that sometime in the spring.
Heck yeah.
I appreciate you guys having me on and annexing Canada.
Behind enemy lines.
Behind enemy lines, that's right. That's right. Yeah, no, grateful to be present in the discussion in regards to what makes a knife valuable. I think it's going to be a pretty fun topic.
Rock and roll. Now, for a little bit of context for anybody that doesn't know, we're all knife nerds here and we're all users. So Gabriel and Phil, neither of them are guys sitting on a giant collection in a safe that does not get used. Phil, I do think, actually has his collection in a safe. I could be wrong. But they get used, though.
They do. They just, they're locked away from the kids.
Which is smart. Mine should be. But regardless. let's talk about value. I think I'm going to pull up a few examples here of value. So this is a Razorback X by Diamondback Country Knives. And this knife and sheath combination here represents a balance of performance and handmade authenticity that is weighted towards the enthusiast as opposed to someone who's looking for something purely practical. So what we're looking at here, this sheath by itself cost as much as many value knives. And the reason is the guy who made this sheath makes them one at a time by hand. This is Black Bear Custom Kydex. He does an absolutely fantastic job. And so his work is worth what he charges for it because he has to pay the bills. He has to make enough money to make a living, and his work is desirable enough for me to pay him to do that for me. That's where the money comes from. And then the knife itself, the Razorback X from Bobby Garza, performance-wise, this thing is absolutely insane. However, once again, there's so much attention to detail and hand finishing and time that went into this knife, and money in materials. It's CPM 3V with some beautiful liners and scales here, black burlap, that this knife could not be sold at a value that's going to match a high quality production knife. And I want to contrast that with something that I believe is a fantastic value before I turn it over to my friends here. This is an Essie Hunglis, Essie Hunglis 2. Let me be more specific. This Kydex sheath is absolutely fantastic. It's production made. They have perfected their manufacturing. They have employees. They have hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in equipment to pump these out as fast as possible. And the knife itself as well, in like fashion, somewhat similar in size, maybe not as much detail, certainly not anywhere near as much art and passion put into this knife, but it's very well made. And for the person who just needs a working tool, who doesn't love a knife, this might be the pinnacle of value for a blade of this size, somewhere around there. I think this is the point of diminishing returns, where as you start spending more money, you don't necessarily always get that much more performance. And as you start spending less money, you might get even less performance as compared to this. So I think we also have knives. I don't have, oh, actually, I've got a cheaper knife. The Essie Jiraca machete. This is made in El Salvador. Sells for just over $100. This kukri, nylon sheath. It's not nice. It's serviceable. I'm not going to be a YouTuber snob who's going to be like, oh, just throw the sheath right away. If I had to use the sheath, I would. I don't love it, but it's basically a freebie at the price. Okay, it's made in El Salvador. It's not made in the USA. When you look at the grinds, they're not as consistent as the other Essie. The finish on it isn't quite as nice. We have wood scales that are hand done to some degree because they can work cheaper down there in South America. But I'm a big fan of this knife. I think it's a fantastic value still for the money. Essie, I don't think is going to put out anything that's not a fantastic value, but you're spending less. You're spending about 50% less money, about $100 compared to $160, just over 100, 110 to 160. And I do believe that you're getting $50 less of value. So everything is on a spectrum when it comes to value. So guys, when you're looking at knives that make you think of value, where are you at here? And what do you think what's a person's minimum investment for a brand or for a cost or for a knife in your opinion? And at what point do you believe that you hit a point of diminishing returns?
Well, I can go first if you guys don't
Yeah.
mind. I know more often than not, if I'm like kind of training with some guys or working with some guys and they ask me for a knife, and I know that they're just like not a heavy knife guy. One I always suggest is the SE. It's really honestly, it's hard to go wrong with SE. I have numerous SEs and I've been using some of them for pushing 10 years now. So, SE's always, I think SE is probably one of the best bang for the buck brands you can potentially get. And for something like even cheaper, if they're just like really on a tight budget, um, I've found that even like the Cold Steel SRKs for the money. I mean, a lot of these are sub $50. So it's, for a high carbon steel knife, I don't think it's the best knife. It's definitely not as good as like an SE, but for $50, I've grabbed a few of these just to throw them in like spare places and stuff, just in case if I don't have anything else, type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Phil?
Yeah, it's funny. Gabe busted out the SRK because that's exactly what I was about to suggest for, in my opinion, one of the best beginner knives. He had the SRK-C. This is the regular SRK. And even in Canadian dollar, they're, $60-$70 on Amazon and Taiwanese made. But, mine came very sharp, decent straight grind on it, comfortable handle. I mean, and with the Secure X sheath, like, how do you go wrong for $60? You just can't. And I agree. I mean, to buy several of them and put them in places, I think is a good idea. They're just a great truck knife, or they're a great vehicle knife, or a pack knife, or whatever the case may be. Leave it up at your cottage. You have something there in an emergency. Now, stepping up a notch, again, SE is a great, especially with their warranty. SE is a great option. They have all different sizes for people's needs at a reasonable price as well. And then if you want to get a little bit more Gucci, as you like to say, I also always will suggest a nice White River. This 45 has been amazing to me. And again, fit and finish is just night and day when you're getting up into the $200 range for a fixed blade. Now I have the leather sheath for this one, and with the matching ferro rod, but I actually generally recommend Kydex for beginners. I feel like they're going to get more value out of that as a beginner. They're more likely to put their knives away wet. They're less likely to take their knives and clean them once in a while, and it's a little bit better for storage.
Absolutely. So actually, you touched on something that I did want to mention, and I forgot. I don't know how many minutes into this we are, but I do believe that White River is perfectly in line with SE when it comes to value. You're paying a little bit more, but I think you're getting exactly that much better of a knife experience. And I think to slide all the way down the scale, if you want that level of value, but you've got, say, $20, I think you can't beat Amora. And I don't know that really anybody would argue that. Wow, this one's edge. This must have been one I lent out in one of my classes. Holy guacamole, I'll have to fix that up. But I've got but when it comes to a friend who might not necessarily be a knife guy, a new student in a class, kids who are able to use knives but may not understand, I'm going to pass a Amora. And there's also Holtefors, which I think gives an equal value to the Mora, although maybe a little bit different balance of performance. And the last thing I want to mention as far as value on the lower end scale here is one brand that could have been my lifelong favorite. and was my favorite at the beginning of this YouTube channel until they disappointed me repeatedly, was Ontario Knife and Tool, who is now no longer in business. So if you got a good Ontario Spec Plus knife, you got a really good knife, and you could get these for $50, made in New York, of $10.95 or $10.75. And money's not worth what it used to be. Maybe $50 then was $80, $90 now. I know the economists won't agree with that, but they're shills anyways. But this was absolutely fantastic. But as you crawl down the spectrum in price, the issue you ran into with Ontario was quality control. You would get factory seconds. You would get knives that should be factory thirds or fourths, things that should have been thrown in the trash or melted or sent off for scrap, were just sold cheap on Amazon. You had a lot of people who didn't know any better who were buying those. They would replace your knife, but this knife is actually the third replacement that I had for a knife that should have been right the first time. And a warranty is worthless if you are out in the bush. So SE is known for their warranty. Their warranty is absolutely fantastic, but I personally believe that if you are out in the woods and you really need that knife and you're halfway using your brain, you won't need the warranty. They offer the warranty because they are confident that you won't need it, because they make a good product and they have great quality control. Ontario, on the other hand, had a good warranty because they were just making stuff so crappy and so cheap that it was cheaper for them to just send you another one and hope that you would buy another one if you were satisfied. And so this was a knife that was cheaper, but as a whole, Ontario offered a lower value, even though it was cheaper as a brand. However, you could get a knife of incredible value if you ended up getting a good one, but is the heat treat going to be good? I guess you're not going to know whether or not the heat treat is good until you know that it's not, right? So that's just a couple of things that came to my mind while we were talking here. You guys have any ideas for knives that you think are not a good value that you want to talk about? Do we want to get spicy tonight? Am I having internet problems?
Oh,
Wow.
whoa, that was weird.
I guess I was talking to absolutely nobody, maybe for like the last 5 minutes.
Well, we heard your entire Ontario spiel, and then it paused, and so then I kind of started saying something, and then all of a sudden, so I don't know what happened.
I was sitting here talking about Ontario, and I was like, well, what do you guys think? And then, like, not only was nobody saying anything, I was like, that's kind of weird. But then I looked and I was like, oh, they're not moving.
Well, that's exactly what I was. Okay, so we heard the what, or at least I heard the what do you guys think, and so then I started responding, and, and then get nothing. So
I still see the whole time I saw the record up the top left. So maybe that's a good thing. I don't know.
We'll see in post edit. There is a chance for my viewers and for my friends here that this could all be a waste of time and everything could turn out looking like crap. But I'm hoping that that will not be the case.
well, to answer your question, what do you think on the like Ontario thing? And what I was starting to respond with is another brand that I got big into knives with that I feel like might be kind of doing a similar thing, although they're not suffering from the quality control issue like Ontario by no means. But Becker knives was the ones that really kind of got me into knives. But anymore, if you look at Becker knives, it's hard for me to suggest a Becker anymore just because the value is not there compared to like an SE, for example. Because when you look at say like a BK7, you're almost spending the same money on that as you are an SE6. but the SE6 is ready to go right out of the box. And if you want to upgrade the sheath, you can. If you want to upgrade the scales, you can. You can do that stuff, but the Becker, you almost have to do that stuff to even have a functional knife. And when I first got the Becker BK7, I was still in the Marines, and the sheath was so terrible. I was out on a 2-week training thing, and the sheath just fell apart. So I had to like duct tape a sheath together to actually carry my knife, and it just looked gaudy, and I got pissed off and just threw it in my bag after a little bit. So there's that with the whole Beckers.
Yeah.
If I may, Gabe, you really reminded me of when I first started off, and my two knives, well, definitely not my two first knives, but my two serious knives was a Rat 7, an Ontario Rat 7, and a Becker BK7. And I remember just being blown away by the performance, the fit and finish, how it felt in my hand. And I was just went crazy for them. And sometimes to this day, I miss that feeling.
Yeah.
Because I have so many knives now, and I've handled so many knives, $1,000 knives, $20 knives, you name it. And there's so much on the market now that, I think it kind of goes back to the whole what's valuable for you. And I feel like whatever knife makes you feel that way should be your most valuable knife, as long as it's able to perform and able to hold up to the tasks that you need it to do.
I think we're all kind of crackheads chasing that first high.
So I got a question. What knife or knife brand do you guys think that doesn't live up to the value?
Uh-oh.
Perfect one. Right here. This is the Benchmade Anonymous. I paid close to $400 Canadian for this guy. Now, I have had many Benchmades. I still have many Benchmades. And I can't personally complain about their fit and finish, because I have had pretty good luck with it. However, I was quite excited a few years ago to see this very slim backpacker kind of catered to knife. And then I get it. And it's crew wear. I was excited to try the steel. I was excited to beat it through some logs and see how it performed. And it performed good. I like crew wear. However, you're getting, probably definitely less than, it's just a little more than, I'm trying to think how thick it is, maybe less than 3/16 thick.
Do you even use US standard, or are you trying to convert metric in your head here?
I actually do use US standard. Everything here is US standard, the reality.
Interesting.
If you're building something, you're at Home Depot, you're in inches and feet. But yeah, I would say that that's probably 3 millimeters. But it's under 3/16 of an inch thick. It's very thin, which makes it very slicey. It's got that high kind of saber grind. And they decided to be a hero and not sharpen the spine, but put this little striking choil in there with this ridiculous long guard that hits your tinder out of the way when you go to strike your ferro rod. And I mean, a $400 knife. This is insanity. I could pick up my Tier 1 BC and Magna Cut with better fit and finish, rounded, beautiful texturing. Like, I can't complain, for less money. And
from a smaller company too, oddly.
From a smaller, lower production company, with a gorgeous leather sheath, scout carry, belt carry, you name it. I mean, yeah, so getting back to it, I really feel value-wise, whether it's fixed blade or folding knife, Benchmade has really, really gone downhill value-wise.
Well, they're spending too much money donating money to the Democrat Party, and so that
I've
money's got to come from somewhere
I've
because
heard
they're
that.
commies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And destroying guns and didn't they get into something with or went against knife rights or something along? I don't know the whole story on that, but
It's a whole thing. So in 2016, when when they got popular for chopping up guns, okay, that's as far as most people ever dug. But at that same time, they'd been donating more and more of their political donations to the Democrat Party and to Democrats. 2016, for some weird reason, maybe there was an election. I don't know. They peaked with 100% of their donations going to the Democrats. But furthermore, they were the #1 supporter of knife rights. And Doug Ritter did lots of work with them, had multiple knives out with them and stuff like that. And without any notice, even though they were friends with him, without any notice, warning, or anything, they just the moment they went 100% Democrat, they also cut all ties to knife rights, cut all donations. I'm assuming because the organization was too pro Second Amendment for the political favors that they were trying to get, who they were trying to get them from. So overall, um, just bad dudes, bad,
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. I always have a folding knife of some kind in my pocket. And for years and years, it was Benchmade.
Hmm.
When Ben over at 5C Knives introduced me to the new Doug Ritter folder being made by Hogue, it really sparked my attention. And now I have 6 or 7 of them.
Hmm.
And value wise, like if you take the politics even out of the question, I mean, I have a carbon fiber handled Magna Cut with the same axis lock designed by Doug Ritter. And it's incredible for $180. Or I could spend 380 Canadian on a mini Adamas by Benchmade. Like, it's insanity.
Hope's
I mean,
very underrated. They do things kind of unique as if they without influence from the rest of the knife community. And
yes,
although I feel like for some reason with their marketing or something like that, they haven't really caught on. But I feel like they deserve to. I feel like they make a really good product and they're good folks.
agreed. I always vouch. And it's unfortunate that the Hogue Ritter specifically is a KnifeWorks exclusive
Mhm.
because I advocate for it all the time and I have for years now. And anybody I recommend, I know they will ship to Canada. And any of my local buddies who have asked, I recommend them all day long.
Mhm. Um,
Jacob, what's a brand or knife that you think it's has lost its value or not holds up to the value that they?
whew, that's really put me on the spot here. Tops knives. I deployed with the Tops knife in 2009 with the Tops Dart, one of the first knives they ever released in S30V. I remember as a young private, I looked up custom knives, and Tops was the only manufacturer that popped up that could get me one. I paid over $300 for it. And at that time, you had to pay extra money to get your knife sharp.
Yeah.
So it would come with a working edge for anybody watching that is continuing the myth that a sharp edge is weaker. Stop it. You don't understand. But anyways, they had a working edge, and then they're like, or we can give it a nice sharp edge. It's an additional cost, but your edge is not going to be as strong. Dollar and Dirt was never able to get it sharp. Terrible hot spots. And then so I didn't learn my lesson. I bought a scorpion's tail karambit that I carried middle of my back again in Afghanistan. And I was running at one point and it just popped right out of its sheath and fell out on the ground. The sheath retention was so poor. I learned my lesson a third time with the Topps MSK, which was specifically advertised as having a true zero ground Scandi edge. Again, I didn't know much about knives at this point, so I'm reading about how you're supposed to sharpen a Scandi, and I'm like, man, it's really not working. Well, yeah, of course it's not working because I'm sharpening across the entire face of the bevel like you should for a Scandi and completely missing the micro bevel altogether. I figured that out. I got it sharp, got it nice and sharp, had a patina on it, stripped it. It was beautiful. Everybody on the forums and everything was always jealous of it. But went to skin out a frozen deer with my buddy, and his cheap Schrade from the corner store that was in stainless held an edge. Like, he did like all the cutting on the deer without having to sharpen his, and mine was dull in like 35 seconds. And so this continued. I've got another Topps dart now, edge thickness at 70 thou in 5160, took damage from chopping down a small maple tree. Should have never taken any damage. White River Knife and Tool and S35 VN. S35 VN should be significantly weaker than 5160, as in significantly. The edge thickness on the FC7 is 22 thou, so almost a quarter as thick as the dart. So we're talking about a massive difference in toughness between what should be indestructible and what should in comparison be more fragile. And the White River took absolutely no damage whatsoever. I had the Topps tracker. I've had a Topps that I liked that I borrowed for a while, is the Camp Creek and S35 VN. I thought that was a good knife, but I've been repeatedly, every experience I have a machete, a 0.17 machete over here that just will not hold an edge. It's just terrible, honestly. There's another one I'm forgetting. Traditionally terrible handle geometry. I haven't talked very much about Topps for a long time, but I'm starting to think that it's time to stop playing YouTube safe. I think it's a waste of my time, and so I am not on the Topps train at all. I think that every single dollar that I've ever spent with Topps, which is a lot of dollars, every single dollar would have been better spent somewhere else, period.
I agree. I'll agree with that. I've had many Topps knives myself, and I still do have a few models that I genuinely use and do enjoy. I love their El Shetty.
That's a beast.
It's a beast. It is truly a great chopper. It's a great utility chopper. But I just can't get over the gas station look models they're pumping
The Mall
out.
Ninja.
Yeah, I can't do it anymore.
Well,
and they had that drop recently at SHOT Show.
SHOT Show.
And oh my
Those
god,
all looked absolutely atrocious. Every single one of those new models just looked absolutely atrocious to me. Yeah.
And then they show the minis, and you can't even get 2 fingers on the handle. I don't even understand. Like, they have the mini El Shetty. I was like, oh, that's neat. I would almost be inclined to purchase a mini if I could actually put my hand on the handle. But and I'm not a big guy, but because it would be almost a fun kitchen chopper.
Yeah,
at that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what would be funny though is if you had the clip from Zoolander where he spazzes out about the little model of the building, like, is this a building for ants or something? And but have the Topps, the little minis.
Yeah.
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 So I think that Topps had a bit, in my opinion, had a time period where they started to redeem themselves, and I think that was with the El Chete and the Yaquer and
Yep.
the Tanimbuco Buco or whatever it was. I think it was about 2017. They started releasing a lot of knives that I thought were a lot more practical, and I was really impressed with the handle and the edge geometry on a lot of them. We started seeing some thinner edges and stuff, and the Camp Creek too. I will say, I think the Camp Creek is a fantastic knife, hands down. Edge holding, edge geometry, handle geometry. It's a belt knife that I would not feel bad carrying for almost any use. But it just seems like we are moving back into some toxic industry trends. And I feel like a lot of the simple practical models that were released that I was really impressed with for their practicality kind of got dropped. I will say I like the Solidago from the guys at Houghton era. The handle specifically is a lot shorter than Topps normally does. So even though it's just as square as normal, it's shorter. So it doesn't cause nearly so many hot spots or as much vibration or anything. And the way that they've got it all set up, it's nice to use. So there's some gems in there, but it's just, I could never, if someone was like, Jake, what brand of knife should I buy? And I could only tell them an answer. I could never explain myself. There's never, ever any reality where what would come out of my mouth would be Topps knives.
Yeah.
Because
only,
if you just go,
I've had, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I've had several Topps knives, and obviously I don't have any of them. Well, I only have two now, and the only two Topps knives that's always stuck with me has been the two Silent Hero series. I don't know
Those look
why
good
those two blades are my favorite Topps knives. The original Mac Daddy Silent Hero, and even the Silent Hero 4.
The Silent Hero 4
Actually,
looks great.
yeah,
Honestly.
I like the Silent Hero 4. I think it's actually one of my like top 5 EDC fixed blades that I rotate it through, just because it fits just perfectly on my side. Actually, Heavy Set Tactical has my old full size top Silent Hero, and he's just been raving about it since he's got it. And which, you know,
The Silent Hero were a hit, and I think they always will be a hit. They were a good design. They were a slicey knife. One of their flagship models that I've never been a fan of, and I've tried 3 times, and I'm sorry, Gabe, but it's the Bob. I don't know what it is, if I keep getting unlucky. And 2 things on it. I've never got one where the pommel of the knife has a little portion milled out for a ferro rod. And
that's about the.
I'm just knife for example, but and you're supposed to be able to do this, and it's never scraped a ferro rod, right?
Nope.
But the spine will. The spine's fine. Never been a fan of the jimping, as I find it destroys my thumb over time, and the edge geometry is atrocious. And the last ad, I put a micro convex and I scaled it down to about, oh God, probably 17 degrees per side, and it was a lot better. But I don't know, something about it. It's like every time I get one, something doesn't work.
Yeah, I actually recently had a Bob sent my way by Peterbilt Knife Guy, and so thanks to him. But so I've been trying one out, and because I've never tried the Bob even,
Yeah,
and he said that it's been owned by like a couple people, so I could tell the edge has been like totally redone on this one. I don't not think it's the factory profile edge on it at all. So I'm still kind of building an opinion on it, but because I've only got it out the one time. So
well, I'll be curious to hear your to watch your video on your final opinion on that knife. I'll be quite interested.
yeah.
Yeah, that's so when the Bob was released, I had gotten back from Afghanistan. I'd been back for a little while. For some reason, I think I wanted to give tops another chance or something. But I think the MSK and the Bob were released around the same time, if not the same time, the same era. And they looked really practical. And I was getting into this bushcraft thing, and I was getting into these Scandi grinds and stuff. And I have not. Every time I've used a Bob, if you have it absolutely razor sharp, it can be enjoyable to use, but it loses that edge in like 39 seconds, and then you just have thickness.
Yes.
And tops, you know, they're hard use brand. They put a zero grind Scandi on it, but to make it tough enough for the customers to actually use it, they just convex it into an oblivion, and it's just a terrible deal, in my opinion.
Bill, I got a question. Was your Bob the 1095 version or the 154 CM version? Because the one,
Sorry, I've had both. I've had two 1095 versions. I've had the black coated with the green handles in 1095. Then I had a stone washed in 154, and then my last one was their acid rain coating that does nothing in 1095. That was my last. So I've had both.
okay, so the one that I have is 154 CM, which I've only he had just a couple, two or three maybe experiences with that steel. So I'm still kind of even trying to build an opinion on that steel. My first use with 154 CM was a Benchmade Arvensis. I can't remember the exact model.
Yeah.
It was more of like a combat looking knife,
Yeah.
and I don't know if guys have seen the recent, post with the like big circular chips out on a particular knife brand, BRK. But that's what happened with my Bark River. Oh shit. But anyways, that's what happened to my Arvensis. I was using it in the cold and I was chopping and it just popped out big chunks like that. So
Wow. I've actually always loved 154. And you got to be careful too. I can't remember if tops is because there's 154 CM and then there's 154 or
CPM
CPM.
154, right?
Thank you, Jacob. And there's a huge difference, but I've always personally had good luck with 154 either or.
yeah.
I have thoroughly used some Benchmades with CPM 154, and it's being very good for breaking down game animals, processing fish, cutting through cartilage, bones, etc. So I don't know. It'd be interesting. I'm trying to remember. I beat the hell out of my Bob in 154, and I didn't have any quality issues per se, and I found it did hold an edge quite well. Mind you, it was sharpened like an axe. But yeah.
So 154 CM or CPM 154, either or, are a phenomenally balanced steel. Hogue to this day, I believe, still uses 154 CM quite a bit. And I think when S35 VN came in, it kind of replaced 154 CM or CPM because it had the same balance of attributes, but a little bit more toughness. Or maybe it's a little more edge holding. One or the other. It's just a couple points, okay? However, like if I was going to get a custom made, I would go for 154 CM or CPM 154 because they have less vanadium in them, which means edge holding for S35 VN, not toughness. So same toughness. I'd go with the 154 because it still holds an edge incredibly well. You're probably not going to notice the difference between the two, but it's easier to finish out for a custom maker. It's going to finish a little better. It's a little easier to work with. So, but it's a fantastic steel, and it's right there with S35 VN, and I think it's wonderfully balanced. But of course, the reality is everybody talks about steel and heat treat because it's so marketable. But the reality is the steel and the heat treat is probably the last criteria that affects the value of and performance of your knife. edge geometry, blade geometry are gonna come far beyond that. And Laren Thomas talks about in his book, and I just posted this recently, so it's fresh in my mind, how if you take 154 cm and with its edge holding, and you thin the bevel 10 degrees total, 5 per side, it will hold it. It will continue cutting to a performance level of S90V. Well, S90V as a steel is fantastic, and I do want to spend a lot more time with some S90V. But if you can have a knife that cuts just as well in 154 cm, being a much tougher steel and a much easier steel to sharpen and a much easier steel to make, then you're that much better off. And
Agreed.
so yeah, so the steel thing, one of the things that I was contemplating talking about in this video was what is a low, mid, or high end steel. And the reality is most of what we view is high end is high end because it's used less in the industry, which makes it more expensive. But if the industry wasn't using 420HC, 12C27 as standard steels in your Moras and your Bucks and in everything else, and your Fox, everybody, it could potentially be a high-end steel because the performance balance that it offers, especially for a large fixed blade, is amazing. The potential is amazing, but people won't pay the money for a custom knife in these steels because they automatically associate it with cheap knives.
Well, a perfect point to kind of carry on what you just said. I actually just shared this video recently. The Aurora Borealis Knives just shared a video talking about
A8 Max.
A8 Max, and it's basically just a higher end OS 8, and right off the bat, and I even seen in some of his comments and stuff, it's like it's OS 8, and it's like if you actually get real OS 8 and it's done right, just like D2, people will look at Wander Tactical and be like, "Oh, it's D2. Why is it a $400 knife?" It's because D2 can actually be amazing steel if it's done right. But the problem is that there's so much cheap Chinese knockoffs of it that's not actually even real D2 or really crappy done D2, or the same thing with OS 8, that it actually kind of just tarnishes the name of that steel.
Well, check this out. Any steel can be ruined, of course, but look at our chart here. We've got edge retention. This is from Knife Steel Nerds, Dr. Laren Thomas. All of this backed entirely by actual scientific testing that's repeatable. But down here across the bottom here, we have edge retention, and then up on the other axis, we have toughness. And look where oh, doggone it, AUS, I don't even have a finger.
Right. Yeah, I see
AUS 8 is up here with 8CR, which Laren Thomas just recently reviewed 8CR, and it's a fantastic performing steel. And so you have a toughness that is somewhat comparable to Magna Cut. Now your edge holding is not necessarily comparable to Magna Cut, actually not at all, and neither is your corrosion resistance, but it is comparable to 14C28N, LC200N, Nitro V. Well, Nitro V, we automatically say, well, that's Nitro V, that's some really good stuff, right? But your OS 8 will hold an edge just as well. And being a 6 on the toughness scale, I don't remember the exact foot-pounds that it takes for this to fail, but it's considerably tougher than 1095. So, and this has been demonstrated by Joe X recently, when his Survival Lily AUS 8 or AUS 8 or whatever steel knives perform from Cold Steel or whoever else perform incredibly well, even compared to these other steels that have this huge reputation for toughness. So the whole industry, again, the knife steel and the heat treat is kind of the last on the list of the priority. How well is the knife made, but how good is that edge geometry? How good is the blade geometry? How good is the handle geometry? One thing I'll say about these Ontarios, all right, is the way that they shaped their Spec Plus handles was kind of flat on the back and just gave me crazy hot spots on the back of my hand with heavy choppy in use. And me, like many people, had the absolute piss beat out of our pinkies by the bottom of this handle. That might not affect outright performance, but it certainly affects comfort and long-term use. So this is, this handle geometry, these handle problems might be a bigger issue than what steel was used.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know when I did my knife showdown series, one of the things that which I have a couple more that I plan on doing, but one of the things I'll score knives on, and if you guys never seen my knife showdown series, I'll just basically do like a whole series of videos where I test one thing out at a time with like 5 to 10 different knives, and one of the things I'll test out is the ergonomics, just because in my honest opinion, if the ergonomics, like you said, beats the piss out of your hand or something, that is actually really going to affect the performance of the knife. Because if you're having to reset your hand every time because it's too slick or too smooth, or it just hurts to use it, you're just not going to use it.
And you start making mistakes. Your hand gets fatigued, and you start making mistakes with sharp objects.
Very dangerous, absolutely. And if anybody hasn't seen The Last Husband Outdoors, they're awesome, because not too many people will take 5 or 6 knives in a row and test them all against each other.
Yeah.
Most knife reviews are, I'm going to take the knife out for one day, do some tasks, but I just got to hand it to you, Gabe. They're pretty awesome videos.
Bill,
yeah, I got 2 more I want to do. I want to do a large knife showdown, which I got your bulldozer. I need to hurry up and do it. It just, it's just those videos are a lot of work.
There's
honestly.
so much work, and the editing is so much work.
Yeah, and I want to do like an EDC belt knife showdown too. So
that would be awesome.
Bill, have you been around my channel long enough to be familiar with the table of destruction?
I have not, but now you've sparked my interest.
You'll have to check that out. I think the table of destruction, I think, is probably one of the foundational pieces of my YouTube channel that's been gone for far too long. And actually, the last table of destruction met its demise when I stuffed like a pound or more of tannerite into a scientific human skull replica.
Right.
And long story short, I was not nearly far enough away from it because it basically vaporized the table, and I got a piece of wood stuck in my back, even though I was like 25 yards away. It was a whole thing. But anyways, that was the last table of destruction. It's been a while. I need to make another one. I've got.
When you get a chance, send me a link. I got to see this.
Sure. So, all right, I've got a question for you guys. Is there a knife brand, in your opinion, that you changed how you viewed their value, or has their value actually changed with their pricing? Is there a brand where you used to think that it was just way too expensive, and now you actually think it might be a good value?
That's a good question. I'm going to go a bit of a different route answering that question, if I can go first.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna answer that with probably any either small production knife or custom maker. And I'll say, Primitive Bear knives, for example, just completely example, or smaller like TRC, or Phobos, or smaller production companies. I think in educating myself, I now understand why it may be a $400 to $500 knife. I've really learned about how expensive it is to get steel, to get materials, work and labor put into it. I think that is probably in recent years one of the biggest eye-opening things for me, and why a smaller maker, whether he's in a shed with a grinder or he owns a small factory, why they're priced the way they are.
Yeah.
I'll actually agree with Phil on that. And something that's really kind of opened my eyes, and he mentioned primitive bear knives, and I've have had a lot of conversations with Alan with primitive bear knives, is when you talk to the actual makers, or even like bear forest knives, for example, and when you see what they have to go through to actually produce a knife, then it really does help you respect the amount of work and what they have to do to produce that knife.
Absolutely. And then back to the conversation with that Benchmade Anonymous, for example. Like I'm paying $400 for that. That has no heart, has no soul. Yeah, I could let a Papa Bear or two as well.
Yeah,
Oh, look.
yeah. Would you rather pay
Yeah,
$400 for the anonymous, or $300-400 for this bush
exactly.
bear?
Exactly. And the heart and soul that goes into something like that, the quality, the fit and finish. I mean, not all makers are equal. Alan does an incredible job. But it's hands down, it's been a huge eye opener for me. And I'm gonna pick small maker over large company any day of the week now.
Absolutely.
Another one that I've found that's kind of worth mentioning, and I'm not really the type of guy that's like, oh, new steel, I got to jump on that. Like, usually I'm kind of a little reserved on it, and I think a lot of stuff is kind of overhyped, honestly. And so I was a little late on the Magna Cut thing, but I got the Schwarz Overland, and this is just made by a small maker as well, and I was actually very impressed with the value on this. This was right at 300 or so for it, and for a Magna Cut blade that's made by a small maker like that, I actually thought it was a really good deal for what it was. And you could go through and just pick whatever custom options and stuff you want for it, which was pretty cool.
That's very cool.
Which this is one that I want to try to send you sometime. I think you'd enjoy using this one.
Yeah. So mine's pretty weird and maybe surprising. Most of my viewers might know that Joe X recently did a lot of videos on Bussy, and is not impressed, and a lot of his viewership was not impressed. And somehow that made me interested in testing them. So I ended up getting a Bussy Bushwhacker Mistress here from a fan and subscriber, and I cannot thank him enough. And I had not liked Bussy before this because my experience with them involved really thick edges and really high prices, and potentially what I would consider to be a poor finish, especially when it came to edges. The general consensus was that you get a Bussy for $800, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000, $2,200, and you put an edge on it. That's absolutely unacceptable to me. However, I got this one here. Edge comes in at 30 thou, which is absolutely appropriate for a knife of this size. It's convex, it performs beautifully. Its handle geometry is wonderful. This knife absolutely performs. So I just went and I just spent $400 on a Bussy, on another one. And I'm going to test that one as well. We will see. But now, I was seeing Bussy knives at Blade Show. The first time I went to Blade Show as a brand myself was, I think, 2016 or 17. They were set up really big back there, all crazy and everything. And I really just wasn't into it. And I think they were more expensive and harder to get at that time. And now I think you can get a massive chunk of what I'm going to call good steel for four to $600 or $700. And when you understand what it costs to make a knife, as a knife brand myself, and you start to appreciate some of the things that you're looking at here more and seeing, oh, that costs money, oh, that costs money. I think it's a much better deal than I did before. And the other thing that I'm starting to realize with value, I probably shouldn't have waited, what, an hour and a half to get into this. You guys correct me if I'm wrong. But I feel like as knife nerds, as outdoor enthusiasts, as bushcrafters and survivalists, it is normal to have a gateway drug into the knife industry. And I think for most people, that gateway drug would be Ontario, SC, or K-Bar and Becker. And I think a lot of us will be chasing that first high that we got from how good this first knife performs and how impressed we are with it. And slowly get more and more and more and more expensive knives. Okay. And have a more refined taste and start slowly having a more educated opinion on what makes a knife valuable and this and that and the other thing. And what I would like to say for a person just getting into it is, if I could find a brand, I'm going to say White River Knife and Tool. If you can save up the money for the first purchase, maybe you're not going to become a knife nerd, but if you could save up the money for the first purchase and buy a White River to start out, it's going to look really expensive when you click add to cart, but it could save you hundreds of dollars in disappointment as you're trying to get to that point. And even if Bussy is as consistent as I would like them to be, even up to $400, $500, $600 for a fixed blade, if you're going to use it a lot, if it's going to be a hard use tool, and if you don't really intend to be buying a lot of them, it might be better to just go out and just spend the money the first time and get a really high-end product. But the problem is, we have, as a society, an ingrained concept of you get what you pay for, and more expensive is more better. And I think we're getting out of this to some degree, but brands and companies take advantage of that and sell inferior products at really high prices. They make them look really pretty, and they make people think that that's what they're getting. A lot of times they don't. So, I think the safe bet here is to say White River. You cannot buy a White River knife and be like, oh man, this thing sucks. I just don't believe it exists no matter what knife you buy from them. They do need a big chopper. And you know what, guys? I might work to try and help them make that happen, because that needs to happen. So FC7. So a lot of people consider an FC7 a big knife. I consider a middle knife in the middle of what a middle knife is. Middle size. I'd say between a 6-inch and a 8-inch is middle. So it's a 7's right in there, and kind of just a middle-sized knife. But you walk around town with it, people are like, dang, what are you going to use that for? Someone actually said this to me one time, carrying a kukri on my way back from a survival trip. What are you going to do with that knife? Skin a lion? And I'm sitting here like, why would I need a bigger knife to skin a lion than I would need to skin something else? I don't really, but anyways, people don't understand.
Well, to the person's defense, I mean, you could very well skin a lion with a good kukri.
I think you could, but probably not the knife you would choose for it.
Speaking of knives, I actually had a bad value experience not even that long ago, and I totally forgot about it. And it was with a Winkler Huntsman knife, and that knife, I got it in, you would think like a 3.5 inch blade. When you think of a 3.5 inch blade, you're thinking, okay, or at least for me, I'm thinking small knife that can just slice, and it's a good slicey user, little belt knife. This knife had worse edge geometry and a worse edge on it than my Hardcore Hammers hatchet out of the box. It was so terrible. And the part that really got me was it was $350 almost. For $200, I could have got a Huntsman or a Primitive Bear Knives Hunter's EDC for $300. I could have got the Schwarz Overland in Magnica instead of ADC RV2, and um, I will never, ever, ever buy another Winkler again. Just from that one bad experience, really, honestly. But
It's crazy what, you know, as these brands, as they get bigger, I've heard people that I trust say that they love their Winklers. So I'm imagining that it can't be everything that they do. But you know, it's crazy. You got to think, and this is where custom makers mess up all the time, is if you're selling a $200 knife and you're really struggling to sell it for $200, people will think, well, maybe if I sell it for 175, people will buy it. Well, probably not. If someone wants to buy it, they'll buy it at $200, or they'll buy it at 175, or they'll buy it at 225. But if you take that $200 knife and you spend $200 in advertising that $200 knife, then you can sell that $200 knife for $1,000. And so these production companies can outsell, they can sell for more money per piece than a custom maker can, and have far less soul in the product, and occasionally have a far inferior product as well. And it's kind of a weird and sad truth.
kind of like a Montana Knife Company selling a $400 knife with paracord.
Good night.
I just opened up a can of worms there.
I don't think we have enough time here tonight for Montana Knife Company.
No,
That's an entirely
we don't have enough time, and just what I want to say in regards to that performance they're pumping out.
Yeah, just doggone. If Black Rifle Coffee was a knife company, ironically, not ironically, it would be Montana. So that sucks.
Yeah, weird. Must be something wrong. Something wrong with the state?
What's that?
I said, is there something up with that state?
Yeah, no, well, actually, ever since, I would say Black Rifle Coffee moved up and did all kinds of stuff in Kalispell before all of these companies kind of popped up. And so, yes, I would say there is, at this point, something wrong with that state or area. But
from my understanding, a lot of Californians invaded Montana. I've had some friends that's moved from Montana telling me that exact thing. So,
not to get too derailed here, but Montana has actually basically always been a Democrat state. And it has basically also always been where your elites and your Hollywood people buy thousands of acres for their retreats and crap. So, so the writing's been on the wall for a long time, which is sad. And my family was a mining family before we ended up on Mount Rainier up in Washington State. My great grandfathers and grandfathers and stuff were miners before they built houses and were builders, but all through Montana and everything up there. And it's wild country. It's an amazing place. And it's kind of a shame, but still worth seeing. It's not as far gone as Washington State. I can never go back to that freaking cesspit, or maybe I could go back to visit, but I most certainly couldn't freaking live there. And the second I stepped foot into the doggone state, I'd be committing multiple felonies, I'm sure. Freaking communists. But better wrap it up here, guys, before I get into trouble. Thank you so much for coming on. For my viewers, I want you to know that I will be putting links at the top of the description box below for The Last Huntsman and for Phil. And Phil, you're getting into some new stuff with ferro rods, maybe some kits with your own channel. I'm so excited about all of that for you, man. I think it's a long
Yeah.
time coming.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I've been making some custom ferro rods, just starting off kind of slow one man production. Sent them out to you guys and a few other people just to kind of get a feel for how they do it in the field. So I do appreciate some feedback. But yeah, no, thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for having me on as well.
Absolutely. Y'all have a wonderful night. I will talk to you guys soon, sooner than later, I would assume. And I'll let everybody know when this goes up and goes live. Thanks again.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
See you.
Later.